We're back with more Dominion Menagerie previews. We've got two bonus previews today, and let's just take them both pretty quickly here. We've got Way of the Pig, which says plus a card plus an action. It's a way, if you didn't get that from the name or from what's on your screen in front of you. We've also got Way of the Sheep, which is plus two money. Again, it's a way. Um, Yeah, so again, the optionality is the big selling point on a lot of these ways, and I think this isn't really different. Way of the Pig, for one thing, um, lets you much more credibly over terminal yourself a little bit in the early game because let's say if I just open two terminals, there's right part of the problem, part of why I don't want to do that sometimes is uh, well, the terminals can collide and then I'm pretty sad. In this case, I'm a little bit sad, but I'm much less sad if I get to cantrip one of them and play the other one for its terminal effect. So that's one thing, and it's pretty good. Um, it also, lessens the pain of ruins. It does all of the stuff that a lot of ways often do. Um, yeah, I guess the other thing is if it lets you get a little bit more in terms of payload than you otherwise would when you're building because you're less likely to um, what am I trying to say here? You're less likely to dud out because you've drawn too much of your payload early because you can convert a little bit of that payload into deck control if you need to. Not that a cantrip is really deck control, but it's relatively to payload, it's deck control. It's not hurting your deck control by having a stop card in your deck. So you got to add a little bit more of those if they're actions. Basically, that's what I'm saying here. That's going to be pretty good, but not game changing. It's not like you're ever really adding a card in your deck just to be a totally blank cantrip. Even Pearl Diver and Vagrant and those kinds of things have other uses, and this doesn't really. So you're not really adding a card because I want to play it as Way of the Pig. There's probably some edge cases, but I mean, you're not you're not really going to do that very often. It does help things like many of the other ways, like rats or skulk or things of that nature. Lackeys, where a lot of the value really was in an on-gain effect. Um, the opportunity cost of getting them is really low. It helps those significantly. The other stuff, it's mostly just like, you get a little more terminal, a little more payload than you otherwise would, and you'll still be fine. Let's move on to Way of the Sheep. Way of the Sheep, I think, is largely going to be weaker because a lot of the uses for Way of the Sheep, or a lot of the uses for Way of the Pig won't be there for Way of the Sheep because Way of the Sheep does not turn your action into a non-terminal. It's still a terminal. You get two money, but it's still a terminal. Um, so that's kind of bad. Um, you're like never buying a card to be a terminal. So, like, look at Duchess, right? I get Duchess kind of a lot, about half my games or something. Most of that is because it's free off of a duchy at some point late in the game where it's unlikely to matter very much either way, actually. Um, this turns most of your cards into mostly the same thing as Duchesses. They're not, you don't have the look at the top things, so it's a little bit different than Duchess, but it's pretty similar to Duchess. Duchess is by no means a strong card, and it's not a card that you're wanting to add to your deck well very often for its own merits. Or you could think of Flag Bearer, right? You're almost never taking Flag Bearer except to take the flag, and this turns your card into a Flag Bearer that doesn't give you the flag. It's not a good card, but there is some power here. And it's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum from Way of the Pig. And the power here for sheep is you can build your deck with like extra deck control. You have extra draw, extra villages. And then at the end, once you've overdrawn, you could turn some of your draw cards into money. Um, because they're draw cards, that makes your deck more reliable. And then this lets you take that reliability and say, and I'm still going to have some money, some payload for it anyway. So that's actually fairly powerful. You could just basically take like all villages and smithies, and you're probably going to want some plus buy at some point. And you're probably actually going to want not just this for your payload, but rather some better payload than this. But you can use basically you can uh, change the way you're building your deck to get extra villages and smithies or just extra draw cards in general. It could be extra labs, right? Um, and that that normally gives you overdraw, which is wasted, other than giving you reliability. Here, it gives you reliability, and it's much less wasteful on the payload side because you still get to turn some of it into money. Um, so that's actually a pretty good effect. You're still going to usually want some amount of other payload, but it lets you build to be more reliable than you otherwise would without taking such a huge sacrifice on your payload. Like I say, this is usually going to be less efficient payload, so you're taking a little bit of a hit in payload efficiency because this is going to be less efficient than probably the other actions that you could take or the other cards you could take for payload. But that's pretty minimal difference in a lot of cases. I mean, it depends on what the alternative is, but it's a pretty minimal difference in a lot of the cases. So this is going to be worth doing a lot of the time. But these are two pretty simple ones, so that's about all I've got to say for today. We'll check back tomorrow with who knows how many. Hopefully tomorrow. Maybe not be tomorrow, but soon anyway, with who knows how many more Dominion Menagerie previews. Thanks for watching, everybody.